Do you remember when mommy and daddy or any guardian figure told you not to judge a book by its cover? And while it still holds as quite honorable advice, the reason that it's reiterated over and over is that we have a tendency to do just that. And unsurprisingly, that translates to how we dress. New York Fashion Week is coming up. I got to go to my first set of events last year. And while it was super exciting and the display naturally comes with artists expressing themselves and inspiring other people, also really stressful. And I was surprised by how strong the power dynamics are intertwined with what you wear and just generally how you present yourself in a public setting. There's a reason why we've seen such a rise in traditional and internet celebrities being featured in runway shows and media, and it's long held that there's a bit of a caste system based on where you sit in relation to the runway. But outside of this itty-bitty world of glamour and art, we all feel this on some level. I knew it was time for me to quit one of my jobs when it was expressed that the dark purple tones I was wearing were too loud for my position as a receptionist. I was referred to look back to the worker's manual, in which I did, and, to their credit, it did say, and I did sign off that I was going to wear primarily gray or black, and it almost felt jarring, me blending into the background of this business be so openly strategized. Hello, I am Kate. I am an artist, and I talk about art, culture, and the internet, and just generally anything I'd love to start a discussion about. And I find that now more than ever, it's a bit challenging to figure out what your personal style is. Fashion is a very arbitrary thing. It can be used to show your perspective as a reflection of who you are or what you value. But if I'm honest, in most cases, I do not dress up or make a particular effort to match my appearance in accordance to what I'm trying to express, unless I'm playing a show or going to some sort of event. I was listening to a podcast interview with Elena Velez, and she said something of the sorts that choosing not to dress up or jump on the latest trend or whatever is a statement in its own right. And I love that notion of making the expression more inclusive, because unfortunately, like all other art forms, the business behind fashion is inherently exclusive. Luxury goods have value because they're upholded by people who are associated with that value and sometimes purposely crafted on a limited scale to enhance that value. Especially as kids, the way in which you express yourself tends to be tied to whatever is most popular, and I think that's natural because we're trying to define ourselves, figure out what herd we belong to. I really wanted to get limited to or clothing from Justice as a kid for this reason, and it felt as though if I didn't obtain these items, then I wouldn't be accepted. I'll touch more on this later, but there's also more aesthetics than there ever have been. And they seem to come in and out on a moment's notice. But uniquely today, subcultures more than ever feel tied to aesthetics rather than the basis of other medium or ideology as they had in the past. Is it fashionable or just expensive? Clothes are fascinating because they don't necessarily have to be very bold and brash to communicate a certain level of class. It's almost like being able to identify the markers or the symbols of clothing that would only be understood by a certain status communicates the status in itself. For example, I am a huge Succession fan. I'm so sad that show has ended, but I think it ended very gracefully. Loved it. But if you look at the clothes, they all up here very simple, but if you start to look in, these are expensive items. There's been several experiments conducted measuring how people react to others based on their clothing. One Psychology Today study said that in all investigations, faces paired with richer clothing were judged as more competent, even when the instructions warned participants to ignore clothing in their own judgments of competence. And I think it brings up a very important principle in that we can know something rationally and still not choose to execute that emotionally. Even a difference as small as tailoring. They did an experiment where they showed pictures of someone in a tailored, bespoke suit, and then a suit that was not tailored. After just a 3-second exposure, people judged the man more favorably in the bespoke suit. Notably, the judgments were not about how well dressed he was. They rated him as more confident, successful, flexible, and a higher earner in a tailor-made suit than when he wore the alternative. It's fascinating that we're not making judgments just on the clothing themselves, but we tie people's appearances to their character almost on a whim. Clothing and even just tailoring, which just isn't available to people who don't have a time to get that done, and B, just resources to tailor your collection of clothes, speak to how clothing is so inherently tied to class. Ironically, a lot of runway brands seem to have taken on a bit of a working class aesthetic, especially in the past couple of years. I also found it really fascinating. Lana Del Rey has been called a Maxxinista, has been seen on the red carpet in a dress that she purchased from the mall. Many pleaded to no one in particular for Del Rey to find a new stylist and become the fashion icon they believe she can be. So it's another case of our expectations and adorations towards this public figure are not matching up with what that person presumably wants to do. And we take issue with that. These days, stars are pretty much expected to be two things. Whatever it is they got famous for, whether that's singing, acting, etc., and a fashion icon. In the days of the internet and social media, hardly a red carpet or event is overlooked. Our culture has become over aestheticized. I don't even know if that's a word, but I'm hoping it is. So much so, I feel like it's expanding beyond just clothing itself, right? Like we are attaching aesthetics to objects, to lifestyles, to interior design. The Stanley cup is the new Hydroflask, which was tied to the character of the Visco girl, which comes with plenty of accessories and as you would buy with a Barbie doll. We see parents making kids' toys all beige to suit their aesthetic. I actually quite like bows, but I think it's really fascinating that bows are everywhere right now. I think they're very cute and I think they're very pretty. And maybe I should try them. I don't know. But it's just so wild how these little bits and pieces of communication can start from something very niche and spread out to the masses based on what they represent. And of course, we cannot talk about fashion without talking about how the system of it is inherently unsustainable. Not only is fashion gate kept as a consumer deliberately, but also the barrier to entry as a successful brand is quite high. I've made a whole video about this on a bunch of different artists, but I have a section on fashion and how difficult it is to succeed and upend trends of unsustainability within that context. But I think this quote from Elena Velez, I clearly love Elena Velez, speaks a bit to it. Part of this stems from the cynicism that I'm not going to be on the scene for much longer because it is such an impossible lifestyle that requires such intense high-level overhead. We've talked about how luxury goods are sometimes made more exclusive, but there's also the obvious other side of fast fashion through brands like Shane and Zara. And a lot of these brands are associated with unimaginable short trend cycles, ripping off designs from independent designers, and just having diminishing quality. So much of the clothing of today is unfortunately made to be disposable for the sake of continued consumption. But at the same time, it's a difficult conversation because sustainable wear understandably comes at a greater cost that a lot of people just won't have access to or might not have access to off the bat. And when you're constantly bombarded by all these different trends and ideas, it can be challenging to hold your ground and be creative with what you own. I think the most productive thing for me when it comes to resisting just buying clothes for the sake of it or buying clothes in hopes of enhancing how I present myself is to look at stylists. I love the way stylists can take something that may seem very ordinary and reinvent it in several different ways. I think that takes true creativity and potentially more effort than just buying another piece of clothing you're only going to wear 1 to 3 times. How do we reject the pull of influence? Well, I think I try to remember that fashion is an art, or at least for me, it's an art. And like any other piece of art, it doesn't need to be expressed 24/7. When it's enjoyable to me, I can engage in it. And while I can recognize that people are ultimately going to make judgments on me based on what I wear or what I don't wear, I get to choose what I want to prioritize. Not all pieces are utilitarian by nature, and that's okay. And most of the time, I'm staying comfortable. I have other friends who go all out all the time and like fashion is their first love, and I think it's incredible. You do you. Whenever we consume something or feel drawn to get something, I find it helpful to ask, what is it about this that is special to me? I think we can all make an effort to shop our own closets. And by that, I mean, look at the clothes we have in new lights. Think about how we can style things, research how to style things, because it's most definitely a skill. Clothing swaps with friends are always cool. And at the end of the day, remember that you are cool and wonderful and amazing just being yourself, right? Wearing what genuinely feels great to you or is insignificant or significant to you, however you want to express yourself, or, put weight into your clothing or put no weight into your clothing. Amazing, because at the end of the day, it's a form of expression. And if you're expressing yourself authentically and what feels right to you, ideally, you're going to attract more of those types of people. And that's wonderful. But yeah, anyway, I would love to hear your thoughts. I still feel like I don't really know a whole lot about fashion, or there's more for me to learn. I haven't quite developed what I consider to be my personal style, and that's probably because I'm still getting to know a lot more about what I like or what I dislike. But I try and remind myself that, there's no rush. I'm very happy to be in a time of experimentation. But I am so fascinated around clothes and power and clothes as symbols. And yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on this, especially if you work in one of these industries or just have a passion for fashion. Tell me all about it. But yeah, anyway, thank you so much for watching. I will see you later. And yeah, bye.